Review Skill 6, Lesson 8. Let's look at our learning targets. I can use prepositions and adjectives to expand short sentences. I can read words with tricky spelling G representing the G and J sound. I can review the spelling alternatives for J, G, and GE. I can reread the story, The Picnic by the River, and answer questions about key details in the story. Today, we're going to review nouns and verbs and practice sentence building. Here we have Gus runs. Who is this sentence about? The sentence is about Gus, and this is a proper noun. Gus runs. What does Gus do? He runs. I have another sentence. Gus runs to the park. Where does Gus run? That's right, he runs to the park. We will practice making other simple sentences longer. Let's look at this one. Kate found a coin. Who is this sentence about? Kate. What did Kate find? She found a coin. Found is the verb in this sentence. What type of coin did Kate find? Kate found an old Spanish coin. Where did Kate find this old Spanish coin? Kate found an old Spanish coin in the cave. We're going to repeat this with several sentences. Deshaun visits the bookshop. Where does Deshaun visit the bookshop? Deshaun visits the bookshop in the city. Jace hops on one foot. Who is this sentence about? Jace. And what does Jace do? He hops. Where does he hop on one foot? Jace hops on one foot in line at school. The next sentence, Roger slips on ice. Who is this sentence about? Roger. What did Roger do? He slips. That's our verb. Where does he slip on ice? Roger slips on the ice while playing hockey. Ming slides to home base. Who is the sentence about? Ming. What does Ming do? Slide. Slide is the verb. Let's expand this sentence. Ming slides to home base to win the baseball game. Let's review our learning targets again. I can use prepositions and adjectives to expand short sentences. I can read words with tricky spelling G representing the G and J sounds. I can review the spelling alternatives for J, G, and GE. I can reread the story, The Picnic by the River, and answer questions about key details in the story. Tricky spelling G. Here we have the words gum, glad, and dog on the left side of our board. On the right side, we have Jim and germ. The words on the left side have the G sound at the beginning and end of them. The words on the right side have the J sound at the beginning. How could this cause problems when you are reading? How could this trick you or confuse you? G is what we call a tricky spelling. The spelling is tricky because it can be pronounced more than one way. To figure out how to pronounce this spelling, you may need to try it both ways. Try the G sound first, and then try the J sound. What is the basic code spelling for J? That's right, the letter J. And 2 sample words are jump and jar. G is another spelling for the J sound. We have the word germs and gym. Our last spelling is GE. We have the words large and charge. I can use prepositions and adjectives to expand short sentences. I can read words with tricky spelling G representing the G and J sounds. I can review the spelling alternatives for J, G, and GE. I can reread the story, The Picnic by the River, and answer questions about key details in the story. Which page does the story, The Picnic by the River, start on? That's right, on page 8. Do you remember who the surprise visitors were at Grace's family picnic? Yep, the ants. Let's reread the story, The Picnic by the River. The Picnic by the River. Last summer, the Spencers had a picnic by the river. They had a picnic basket filled with food. It was stuffed with all sorts of good things: chicken wings, ham, grapes, chips, and cupcakes. Mr. Spencer set the picnic basket down. Grace and Jill went for a swim in the river. After their swim, the children raced back to the spot where the picnic basket was. When they got there were ants marching down the side of their picnic basket. The ants were marching off with some of the food. The Spencers had set their basket down next to the center of a big ant hill. "Yikes!" shouted Grace in a loud voice. "Who asked those ants to this picnic?" Mr. Spencer picked up the picnic basket and brushed off the ants. Much of the food was in plastic bags, so it was safe from the ants. Grace and Jill rinsed off the grapes after they brushed off the rest of the ants. The Spencers sat down and ate their picnic lunch. This time they sat far from the center of the anthill. After lunch, Mr. Spencer asked, "Should we pack up our stuff and get back to the farm?" "Not yet," said Grace, and glanced back at the anthill. She smiled and slipped some bits of cupcake and ham into her pocket. Then she ran to the anthill. She set the bits of cupcake and ham on the ground next to the anthill. "There," she said, "that will be lunch for the ants. I think ants are cool when they are not crawling on our basket." Turn in your Skill 6 workbook to activity page 8.1 on page 35. The Picnic by the River. Go ahead and write your name and date on today's paper. Number 1. What was in the picnic basket? The picnic basket was filled with food. There were chicken wings, ham, grapes, chips, and cupcakes. We read that on page 8. Where had the Spencers set down their picnic basket? Mr. Spencer set their basket down next to the center of a big ant hill. We read that on page 10. Why was the food in the picnic basket safe from the ants? Much of the food was safe from the ants because it was in plastic. That was also on page 10. And what did Grace do for the ants at the end? At the end, Grace set bits of cupcake and ham on the ground for the ants. Page 12. Let's look at our learning targets one last time. I can use prepositions and adjectives to expand short sentences. I can read words with tricky spelling G representing the G and J sounds. I can review the spelling alternatives J represented by J, G, and GE. I can reread the story, The Picnic by the River, and answer questions about key details in the story. Happy learning!